Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Pricing Guys. I'm Michael.
And I'm Avy.
So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about discounting. And this was spurred on by really an article we saw in the news about oil prices dropping. And we kind of got into a little bit of a debate because what happens is you see oil prices drop, but you don't necessarily see the price at the pump drop the same amount. So, why does that happen? And what are some of the repercussions of, prices in general going down?
Yeah, so I think they were saying that OPEC is accelerating their production and oil prices are plunging. But to your point, right, all these petrochemicals that are theoretically going to be coming at a cheaper price, we don't see that, and all their corollary items, even as business inputs, like no one's talking about expecting drops in pricing, right?
No. And I think oil is probably like the classic example, but I would say we see this all the time where you drop your price and you think that, all of a sudden, I'm gonna increase my volume or I'm gonna be able to win a specific deal, but it doesn't necessarily happen, right? Especially if you're in an environment where there's kind of a couple people who have their hands in the cookie jar as well.
Yeah, between you and if you're going through distribution or resellers, exactly. And I think what's interesting about that dynamic is, to your point, right? If you drop your price, and this is just purely kind of functional at this point in time, let's say you want to you drop your price by 10% and you want to reflect that decrease and you're going through a distributor. Well, a lot of times you don't have that great visibility on what the distributor is actually selling that there for. So you have to get your distributor on side with doing it. Then your distributors inventory.
Well, and a lot of the time they're going to make
pricing.
They're going to make less margin too, right? Because usually they're making margin as a percentage, so they don't like that, right? Because their percentage might stay the same, but their margin dollars are usually going down, right? So you have to be pretty sure that the volume is going to increase to get that total margin up.
Exactly. And I mean, when you're talking about things, and I know we started with oil, but let's pretend we're carrying that through. When you're talking about commodities like oil, it's tough, right? Because it's a need-based item. It's not like some people might hedge it. Some companies might hedge it and buy a ton, but it's dicey, right? So as a distributor, thinking about, I've got the price up, I'm making more dollars per unit now. If I go ahead and decrease this, I'm probably going to make less dollars per unit. I don't know if that volume is going to come. You have a lot of incentive to kind of hold back and continue buy at the lower cost, make the more dollars per unit, and then see what happens with volume, right? But it's tough. And I think it's, in industries where you really want to see that price reflect to customers, what are some of the strategies you've seen that have worked to kind of encourage those distributors to get on board with the price adjustments and start to reflect that out in the market?
Well, I think one of the things you have to look at a lot is, and what I don't hear enough people talking about these days is what we call kind of margin pool or value pool. Mm-hmm. And it's if the end user, the end customer is paying X, right? How much of that does each kind of person along the value chain get? And I think one of the things that I've heard in the past, especially when going through kind of a distribution model, and it really bugs me, is like, well, no, this guy's going to make the margin that you want to make, and I'm kind of fine because I've kind of sold it through. But what you don't realize is that every decision that happens along that value chain has a final impact on the volume and what's going to actually kind of pull through. So I think anytime you're giving discounts or anytime you're dropping the price, and it's not tied to a specific behavior that you're trying to enlist from someone down the value chain, it's a waste of time, right? Especially if it's not driving what you need it to drive. But I think the first thing is you have to understand what you need to drive.
I think you make a really good point because, usually it's the supplier or manufacturer that understands the value of the product that they're bringing more than anyone else. And as you're going through your channel partners or your distribution, they're selling a lot of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And granted, they're close to the customer, they know they're taking the order and whatnot. But a lot of times that's what it is, right? It is order taking. So I think it's really incumbent on that supplier or manufacturer to really help their channel partners understand the value that they're providing, how they want it positioned to customers, how they want it sold, why it needs to be positioned, price positioned in a certain way, and track those results with them. Because if they're kind of taking that, laissez-faire approach, I sell it in, but whatever they sell it to the customer is whatever they sell it to the customer, then you're really um, at the mercy of someone who's not devoting 100% of their mind share on your business. They're just kind of doing what they're going to do. And usually it's really mindless, right? Hey, I made 40 last year. Let's try 42 this year and let's just let it rip, right? And you're kind of looking at it. Hey, my velocity is down. They're not stocking as much of this SKU. What's happening? But a lot of times it's just not having that proactive discussion or knowing what strategy we want to execute in the market.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond kind of that distributor model to, like, I see it a ton in software, albeit it's a lot of the time in the software space is more of a direct sale, so you don't have kind of that middleman. But we see it a lot with like discounts and what discounts you're kind of pushing out there, and the discounts that are quote unquote kind of discretionary, right? So you give the sales team the ability to discount up to a certain amount. Number one thing is, like, we see those guys going down to that right away, right? If you give someone a 20% discount, that's probably where they might start the negotiation already like 15 to 18% kind of baked in. But I think one of the biggest challenges that I see organizations face is, like, they're not tying the discount to a customer behavior. So even the behavior doesn't have to be for your channel partner distributor. The behavior could be for your customer. So a lot of the times, in a software example, it's, am I trying to add term? Am I trying to add users? What am I trying to do to kind of elicit this discount, as opposed to just kind of giving somebody a discount for no particular reason?
We were actually just working with a communication hardware provider. And one of the things that they said was their major issue was that they had such pervasive discounting. So when we started looking into what was going on with the discounting, it was exactly what you said. So they said, you know what? We have a max discount of 20%. Anything over 20%, you need to ask for approval. As we were looking across product categories, and this discount level would differ for different product categories, we found that, 95% of the business is discounted at 20%. And then when we went to the next one, the max discount was 25. Okay, 98% is discounted at 25. And it was just simple in terms of, okay, we're adjusting those. The sales team was just ingrained to go straight to those thresholds. That was essentially their market price. So, all right, we're looking within the portfolio where we have more value than the competition. We're offering we're a better alternative to create more value for the customer. We started adjusting some of those tiers, and it's almost surprising because the company internally thought there would be so much pushback. They weren't necessarily worried as much about the pushback internally, because of course that was coming, but there was going to be so much market pushback that would happen from the volume perspective. But as those things rolled out, it was much easier and much more lucrative than even we were forecasting. So I think that's another thing that comes across with the discounting. There's a lot of emotion involved in it, right? Because at some point, especially when you're talking about there's discretion in it, it's someone that's made a call, right? They've assessed the business realities around it, and they've determined this is what we have to do and why we have to do it. And I think when those decisions get questioned, it becomes personal sometimes.
Yeah, and I think part of it is they want a little bit of control, I think, and that's what it kind of comes down to, is how much control kind of lives with the person who's actually kind of making the deal versus, the guidelines and the procedures that you kind of have to go through. And I find what's really interesting is, especially in these like B2B examples, where a lot of the time, if I lower my price of like this communications, right? It's not like all of a sudden someone's going to be like, oh, well, I was going to buy this many phones or devices. And now all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to buy like way more, right? Like what the discussion a lot of the time is like, well, it's a buy, no buy. I'm either going to buy from you or I'm going to buy from someone else,
Yep.
right? And a lot of the times you can't expand the size of the offering unless you can get into like some kind of upsell, cross sell. But a lot of the time, kind of the offering is the offering. So really thinking about, well, what impact does that discount actually have on the probability of you being able to convert this customer? Because a lot of the time, it's some of those more intangible things that are more important than price. And we put so much emphasis on price and does a customer get a good discount? What is it versus, what does that customer actually care about? Right? Am I easy to work with? Do I have good customer service? When my telecommunications stuff breaks down and they call me, am I going to pick up the phone? Right? Because in a lot of business contexts, that's way more important than getting a little bit more discount on that price.
I think coming back to something you were saying too, in terms of that they want ownership on the deal, and it gives them, that discounting threshold gives them a bit of ownership or a bit of power in the deal. I think what's interesting, and it's almost like reorienting a behavior. I can totally understand that they're the closest to that customer, but helping the team and empowering the team with all of the insights from the entire customer base and what have we learned and what are the different segments and where are we driving value, and here you're working in this microcosm, but once we get out to hundreds of thousands of transactions and thousands of customers and combinations, helping to empower them with that information and providing those guidelines, I think, puts them much more in a data-driven position, but it requires that mindset shift, right? It's getting out of that emotional kind of, I own this. This is my customer. I know what's best, but it's just not even physically possible, right?
It's funny because I always think back to, I forget what we were working on. This must have been like a decade ago. And we were working with a client, and then we kind of showed that dispersion chart where everyone, like, the discounts are all over the place. They weren't tied to anything. I remember you and me kind of going through. We're like, every one of these dots has a story. If you go talk, well, we had to do this because of this, and we had to do this because of that, and all of a sudden, right? Like, you're talking about hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of transactions, and yeah, each individual one could kind of have a story, but you can't tell me that every single one has to be an outlier from what you're doing, and it just turns into a chaos if you're doing it that way.
And I mean, the first couple stories make sense, but if you go in kind of 20 or 30, you're like, hey, that story kind of sounds like that story. And how come we did something different?
Oh, there's really only like two or three stories, right? But it's kind of that different day, different time, different person, and you get a very, very different result. Right?
Oh, for sure. The moon was in that position that night, and therefore we looked at the sundial, and that dictated this number. Whereas here, the temperature was that, and here's why we disappeared at this level.
Or we hear a lot of time, I don't know. Not sure. Don't remember. Oh, I'm sure there was a good reason, right?
Or we changed people. That was a different team. They weren't doing this. Now we are paying for the sins of the past, and we are getting up there over time. So, I mean, all of these things come up and they happen because it's regular business, but it's starting to think about how you introduce some structure around that and bring some data to that and help the organization understand. Because I think in a lot of cases, organizations just don't understand the scale of the information or the data that's available and the insight that you can get from it too. And I think the other piece of that to help aid the salesperson is, here's our forecast behind it, and here's what it should drive. And if making these decisions isn't driving this on win rates, isn't driving this from profitability, isn't driving this from volume, it's legitimate to have a proactive discussion on, yeah, the models suck, right? We got problems here. Something shifted.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes back to the what we kind of talked about at the beginning is, if you're going to move your price down, whether it's your base price or you're going to be giving a discount, you just have to be careful. You have to really, really understand what the repercussions of what you're doing are. And I think the number one thing is you have to monitor to make sure, exactly like you mentioned just now, like that you're going in the right direction, and how is it impacting your results.
So I know kind of tying this one off with a bow, what OPEC's doing, there's probably some political stuff associated with it as well.
That's for another episode, right?
Yeah. But
we can get into the politics of the Middle East for sure.
We'll see what kind of pricing drops around it. It'll be interesting.
That's all we have for today. We'll see you next time, guys.
Please come to revenueml.com and submit your topics. We'll see you soon.